this next section was intended to just provide brief updates on things that are outside of Equitable Modern Grid, but still take up a good chunk of PURA's resources. So I guess I'll just kind of flip through them in favor of getting to Representative Steinberg on time. Since the docket numbers are all provided in these next slides, that should give you a resource to look them up on the PURA website if you have more any more questions about them. So mostly the flavor of these next couple slides is to give you a flavor of other things that are in PURA's jurisdiction, because as much as the the Equitable Modern Grid is first and forefront for me and from some of the staff that you heard from today, we have a lot of other things in our orbit and levers to pull on, if you will. So we have some limited jurisdiction in telecom. We've got a couple of active dockets. There's a major bankruptcy proceeding, that Frontier. Those hearings are coming up in a week and a half. We also do address pole attachments. So this comes up, in broadband space. So we recently issued a notice of violation to a lot of the pole owners for not completing the pole attachments in the specified times. And I touched on a little bit that we also do have jurisdiction over the siting of small cells. So those are kind of the ways that we're most active in the telecom space. In the Frontier and SNET arena, mostly our focus there is on the limited number of our jurisdictions over the landline service. So we don't have jurisdiction over their cable or internet or VoIP offerings, voice over internet protocol offerings. But because they do have some landline service in the state, they provide 911, and they also are pole administrators. We are playing an active role in ensuring that ratepayers are protected in that proceeding. In the gas sector, we also have jurisdiction over the 3 major LDCs, and we also are responsible for pipeline safety of the major pipelines in this state. A few of the active dockets, our jurisdiction in the gas arena is largely directed by, we're a creature of statute, and we take our direction either from the comprehensive energy strategy that DEEP has released, which is a driver to the system expansion docket, which is the gas expansion docket. And the legislature has asked us to create interconnection standards for renewable natural gas. So those are some things that we've been working on. But we also can take up things on our own motion. And one example of that that I wanted to highlight was on our own motion, we took up a docket in February that we recently concluded on establishing uniform gas leak classifications. And importantly, in this docket, we created for the first time a definition for a grade 3 environmentally significant leak, borrowing in large part from a program Massachusetts has launched in recognition of the methane word I'm searching for, and recognition that some of those grade 3 environmentally significant leaks can emit quite a bit of methane. So we recently completed that docket, and effective January 1st of next year, there will be a requirement that the LDCs, which stands for Local Distribution Company, which is the 3 major gas companies in the state, Yankee, Connecticut Gas, and Southern, they have to start complying with those rules and regulations on January 1st. Quickly in the water sector, I've kind of touched on a few of these already as well. Our jurisdiction is related to the things on the screen here, mostly focused on the large water companies. Again, so looking at the water supply plans in conjunction with DPH for those regulated entities. And then lastly, we do other things in the electric space as well. We have a couple of open investigations, which have been in the news a lot lately, looking at rate adjustments. We've done quite a bit of work in response to the COVID crisis, instituting moratoriums, mandating the creation of payment plans, and we're currently actively engaged in investigating the utility storm response. A few other dockets that I think, I've seen a lot of familiar faces from this crowd in is, as many of you know, we have an active investigation. We accepted a petition in May to investigate, to study enabling community choice aggregation in the state. So that docket is open. We recently had a technical meeting to receive presentations on community choice aggregation models from other states and consumer protection considerations. So we are continuing to plug away at that study. And as you've probably gotten a flavor from the past couple hours, we have quite a lot on our plate. So we are we are always open to considering additional studies or additional investigations or other things. We are open to that, and we want to be a resource, but hopefully you've gotten a flavor for the massive amount of work that we have on our plate at the moment, in addition to the Take Back Our Grid Act that tasks PURA with a lot of work in and of itself. So happy to always be a resource, and I'm looking forward to the conversation with Representative Steinberg, so we can hopefully close out today's conversation with how the two of us have kind of found a path forward in engaging in each other's processes. So I apologize for that really rapid overview, but the docket numbers are there for anyone who's interested. And that's that part of that presentation. Thank you.
If I could steal some of your general session here, there's a number of questions, and I put them in a bucket of how wide is your jurisdiction. So I'm gonna rattle them off. What is PURA's relationship to the Connecticut Siting Council? There's someone who has a very deep interest in what sort of control you have over water utilities, in particular Aquarian. Is it within your power, or can you point us to a place? How can we get the government to take responsibility for designating appropriate sites for large-scale solar? And there's a very controversial proposal in Hamden that sort of is the prompt for that question. Just two more. This one is near and dear to my heart. In 2018, which is before you arrived, the legislature, because they had to, I think, took many millions of dollars away from the Clean Energy Fund and put it into the general fund. That's happened through history. Is within PURA's power to stop that, or advise on how we can stop that in the future? And the last gigantic thing that I'll try to wedge into this endless question is, does PURA or the state have any position on the carbon fee and dividend program, which is a national program aimed at a carbon tax? It might logically fit in PURA because it's sort of an Uber rating mechanism to put a fee on carbon. And I'll stop there.
Thank you. I was not personally monitoring the chat. I'm not that I'm not that gifted to do all those things at once. So thank you for that. Let me try to tick through these. Our relationship to the Siting Council is so the Siting Council is a separate agency from PURA, but there are, I think, 9 voting positions in addition to a full-time staff. I don't think all 9 of those board, I'm not sure if they're called board positions or commissioner slots. They're not all full right now, I don't believe, but PURA is one of those permanent members. By statute, I have a seat on that board, which I designate one of our staffers to sit on. So we are one of the voting members, and our jurisdiction, while related, is distinct. So like in the like small cell siting context, for example, we have jurisdiction over the siting of small cells on utility poles, while the siting council has jurisdiction of small cell siting on utility large scale infrastructure. So like we cover similar matters, and PURA is one of the voting members, but we don't ever like rule on the same thing on the same project, if that makes sense. So your second question about water companies. So as I mentioned at the top of the presentation, we have jurisdiction over some of the water companies in the state. Aquarion is one of them. And our jurisdiction is also over the Connecticut Water Company and some of the smaller systems that have been acquired by Aquarion or Connecticut Water. So how we exercise that jurisdiction is mostly related to our core mission of reliable rates and administering their infrastructure program. There's a program that allows them to accelerate replacement of water infrastructure that we oversee. So we can certainly assist with any questions about billing structure or things like that. And then, as I mentioned, our vice chairman is on the State Water Planning Council. So we do advise in that context on, we're keeping apprised of like PFAS, for example, and things like that, and trying to think ahead to how we will need to incorporate like cost recovery associated with that into our water companies. Then, is there anyone who can take responsibility in the government for large scale, identifying sites for large scale solar? I think the answer to that's probably yes, but it's likely not PURA. It's probably DEEP. So DEEP, as they're structured, they have jurisdiction over creating the integrated, the IRP, which I understand will be coming out shortly. There are things that PURA could do to get at the same issue and have done. Like we can, in creating some of these programs, for example, create adders that incentivize siting of distributed energy resources on brownfields or landfill, same thing. Like we could create adders in the programs, but the programs we're talking about are mostly local distributed energy resource programs. So the more large scale programs that the siting council has jurisdiction over the siting of, and DEEP's more traditionally in the role of procuring, that probably I'd have to defer to my colleagues at those two agencies. The fourth question you asked about the Clean Energy Fund, yes, definitely predated my tenure, but I've heard quite a lot about it in the year that I've been here. My understanding is that the governor is committed to not sweeping that fund again, but because the conservation load management programs are administered by DEEP, we at PURA, we don't really play a role. That's not at all to say that we don't value energy efficiency or demand response. When I was at the Maryland Commission, which is the Maryland version of PURA, most commissions do have jurisdiction over the energy efficiency programs. And so I've got experience and be happy to talk to people about the programs, but I'm not the expert on the way those programs are administered in this state. That belongs to DEEP. If that issue came, up again in the future, I'm sure PURA would see how we could comment in that. space, but I don't think that we have the primary lever to pull there. Defer to our colleagues at deep and the legislature. And then the last question about the carbon fee. So as you noted, Bernie, in my bio, I have been involved in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative since 2011. And, back in Maryland. And I feel very strongly about a regional approach to carbon reduction as being the most cost-effective way of doing that. And RGGI is very careful not to characterize itself as a tax. So that's, but it's a similar model to what I understand the carbon dividend and carbon tax to be, looking at, or at least there are parallels. I have a board seat as the chair of PURA on RGGI, as does Katie Dykes as the commissioner of DEEP. So I imagine if a carbon tax, specific to Connecticut was to be considered, I would hope to have a seat at that table, as I think it has very clear parallels to the work we do. But it is, I think, likely, something that would have to be done at the direction of the administration and the legislature. And then I think I missed a point on siting council. So maybe if I just ask Josh to fill that in, and then I think we have hopefully addressed those questions.
Sure, and then real quick too on, I just want to address as well the siting of utility scales systems and solar systems in Connecticut. There is a report, not this legislative session, but next or last legislative session that was mandated, and Representative Steinberg can probably speak to it more than I can, but I believe it was DOT and DEEP are required to look at the land available from DOT for utility scale solar. So that's one part. And then I just wanted to note that there is our Shared Clean Energy Facility Program, which is the statewide community solar program, does have an adder, a bid preference for brownfields currently. So certainly people that are interested in other adders or bid preferences should get involved in that docket. And then the other thing I wanted to say on the siting council, I think really the heart of that question, if I'm understanding it correctly, is kind of, what's the role of coordination between the siting council and PURA, particularly when it comes to renewable energy. And I'd actually point to the docket that we opened and we weren't able to discuss that much, which is REO 9. So 171203 REO 9 for everyone keeping score at home. That docket is really about, I know I've said comprehensive probably 20 times today, but it's really about having a comprehensive look at all of our programs and then also coordinating with other state agencies on that so that we're not missing anything, right? So we've had conversations with the siting council there, the deep stormwater permitting process we've looked at and talked about there. So that's also another focal point where we're trying to hope to not only enhance coordination, but also I think in the thread, there's a lot of questions about data, get as much data in one place as possible on our renewable energy programs.
This is fantastic. I know we've taken more than half of the time for this 20-minute segment. I will just add, as I turn it back to you all, that PACE is working on exploring the generating potential for parking lot canopies. And just the one town that we've looked at so far, and I credit my compatriots, not myself, at PACE, is roughly a third of Simsbury's current electric consumption could be powered off of their parking lots. So it's very helpful to hear about where your potential for adders and programs might play in.